You're on, Frank.
All right. My name is Frank Garcia, and I'd like to welcome everybody to Tech School. Passing it over here to Steven.
Awesome. Thanks, Frank. Yeah, for those of you tuning in on YouTube watching this Tech School, feel free to give us a like, leave a comment down below. All the interactions we get with videos like this help push it out to more people. So if you found something really insightful, really cool about Carrie's talk today, feel free to give us a like, leave a comment. It could push it out to somebody who might find it equally as insightful. But I will hand it on over to Carrie.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stephen. And thank you so much, Curling, for having me today. So we are going to be doing a founder's story. And sorry, Stephen and Curling in advance. As I was preparing for this, I'm like, ooh, I want to talk a little bit about decisions that you make as a founder or that lead you to being a founder. So I'm going a little bit rogue on the founder's story, if that's okay, Curling.
I love the rogue part. It's always good.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to go rogue and I'm going to talk about the decisions that you make that lead you to become a founder. And there were 5 key decisions in my life that brought me to where I am now. And so who am I? I'm Carrie Sawyer, and I am the founder of Diversity by Design. We use design thinking to help companies build equitable practices and processes so that they can create really great environments for their employees, their communities, their clients, all the people who are in their ecosystem. I'm also the founder of the Inclusion First Project. And that is a special platform that is designed to give people a safe space to come and ask questions about anti-racism. No judgment, no fear. We're going to answer questions whether you think they're stupid, you should have learned them in high school, you think they might be a little bit racist. I don't care about that at all, as long as you're coming from a place of wanting to learn more and do better and help create that world that we all want to live in. And so the Inclusion First Project was started in July, a little bit after the murder of George Floyd, as really just a safe space for people to come and get some resources, because so many people are figuring out that they want to be a part of making the world better, that it's time for everyone to kind of take that step forward, but they don't know where to start, especially our white allies, right? And so this is what the Inclusion First Project is all about, giving them that space to start. So I want to talk about my founder story. And it definitely, like probably many others, has not been a straight line. I actually didn't know that I would be in this position right now. So when you're founding a company or founding anything, it really is all about making that decision to do so. And so I'm going to share the decisions, even the ones that didn't seem related to becoming a founder at all, that brought me to where I am right now. And so the first part of my founder story really starts on my couch in about 2011. I live in Chicago. It is a cold winter, and I'm sitting there watching Harry Potter again, surrounded by takeout boxes, because you do not go outside, as everyone watching from anywhere cold knows. I'm just, just living my best couch potato life. And
nice.
One of my friends from the University of Michigan, where I got my master's, she called me up and she was like, "Hey, Carrie, I had this idea to start a wellness conference for Black women. Do you want to help me with it? Do you want to be my co-chair?" And I was like, ooh, co-chair, never done a conference before, not sure about that. But looking around at the chips and the hamburger, I'm like, yes, I want to do something more productive with my time, so I will absolutely help you. And of course, that led into me becoming the co-chair. And so we founded a wellness conference called Black Women's Life Balance and Wellness Conference. And it was hosted in Atlanta at Spelman that first year. And we were super zealous. And so we created a really complicated conference for our first one. We had tracks, we sourced presentations from all across the country. We had multiple keynotes, and it was this whole big thing. And at the end of the day, when you do something, when you found something like that, your one question is anyone going to even show up? Right? And so when we had the first day of the conference, people came. We had about 60 or 70 people. And it was an incredible experience for me, because we've done all this work to gather these Black women to share their expertise on everything from their PhD research to how they lost 100 pounds to their newest project to their startup. And it was beautiful. And, stereotypically, Black women are known, if we get together, we're going to fight. There's cattiness, there's all this stuff. All that is a lie, number one, but it definitely wasn't a part of this beautiful experience. And we knew that we needed to do it again. And so we decided to do it as many times as we possibly could. So making the decision to say yes was this first time where I put myself in a position where I realized I love uplifting and empowering people. In fact, it was so fulfilling that every time that I had the conference, it was like the most uplifting moment and then the most like disheartening, because I saw these women doing these incredible things and knew that I wasn't yet walking in my power. And so I would call my mom and tell her all the great things that happened. And then I'd end up like crying afterwards because I'm like, why aren't I doing the thing that I would love? Why don't I know what that is? And so that also started me on the path of trying to figure out what is the thing that I'm supposed to do in this world that will light me up in that way. Okay, so I was living in Chicago, I told you that. The next decision that I made was on a beach in Chicago on Lake Michigan, because I love beach volleyball. I love it so much. I would play it all the time. A lot of people who aren't familiar with Chicago's landscape don't know that there's tons of beaches because it's right there on the lake, and people go nuts for volleyball, both in the winter and especially in the summertime. And so I'm there playing volleyball. It's a beautiful, sunny summer day, like here in San Diego all the time. And I look around and I'm like, you know what? I would love to live somewhere where I can play volleyball all year long, not just these like 2.5, 3 months that you can when you're in, in the Midwest. And so I decided that moment, I decided that I was going to move somewhere where I could play volleyball all the time. And so, I did my research, and I ended up thinking California was the best place for me. And so I started on that journey. And I actually just started by telling people, hey, friends, this is my last winter here in Chicago. They're like, oh my gosh, Carrie, that's amazing. Where are you moving? What are you doing? I'm like, I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I'm doing, but I know this is my last winter. And it was my last winter. As things tend to work out when you are on your path, it just kind of snowballed. I had a friend who I went to grad school with. She lived here in San Diego, worked for Qualcomm, and she had gotten engaged, and her fiance was doing his residency in San Francisco. So she was moving. She did the exact same thing as me, but in San Diego. And she's like, Carrie, I gotta quit. You should apply for my job. Long story short, I got the job. Qualcomm moved me from Chicago to San Diego. Boom, I'm here in San Diego, living my best life, playing volleyball all the time. So when I get to Qualcomm, it was really great because I had hopped around jobs a lot in Chicago because I was searching, right? I'm searching for that thing that I really, really want to do that I would love, and I wasn't finding it. Now, Qualcomm solved a problem for me in that Qualcomm is inventing the technology of the future. They're doing all kinds of things, and so I was not bored with the content. And so the next decision that came actually was when I was sitting at Qualcomm in my boss's office. And so when I first arrived at Qualcomm, I got super involved in their employee groups, the women's group, the Black group. I'd volunteer for the LGBTQ plus group, the Latino group. I was like doing everything. I was doing the most with these employee networks, but I loved it because it was letting me uplift people. And so I had this like diversity inclusion side hustle is what I've heard it called, where, you're living the double life, doing your job, and then also doing the diversity and inclusion stuff. And so my job was to be a user experience researcher. And so that's all about making technology easier to use. My degree was human computer interaction. That's what I have my master's in. So I'm all in the tech world, living the tech life, and then also doing the diversity inclusion stuff, which I wasn't calling it that at the time, but that's ultimately what it was. So next decision, sitting in my boss's office. And I love learning. So I had planned to go to a women's conference. And as part of that conference, we had pre-work where we had to get feedback from people about our strengths and our opportunities. So feeling very brave that day, I'm like, hey boss, can you please give me some feedback on, how I'm doing, what my opportunities, what my strengths are. And so sitting in his office, and he's like, Carrie, I think that it's so great that you are so involved in these different networks. I see you with the women's group, with the Black group. I see all the energy and passion. I love how well you are representing our team, and I think it's fantastic. Now, what I would like to see is you bring that same passion and same creativity to the job that you're doing for us. And I was just like, what? Are you serious? Like in my mind, I reacted very calmly, I'm pretty sure. Maybe I might have scowled at him, but I'd never gotten any negative feedback from this man before. And I was just like, no. Like in my mind, I can't bring the same passion that I bring to the women's group and the Black group as I do to my user experience job, because for me at that point, human computer interaction, design thinking, all of those things were like being right-handed. And no one is passionate about being right-handed. You just are. Like it's literally, I see everything through that lens. But because my reaction was so large inside of my head, I was like, well, maybe there's something there. And so I decided that this was a big clue on my path to figuring out what I was supposed to be doing. I had like, a third of a life crisis. What am I doing with my life? What's my purpose? And I thought that I had to pick between user experience or go find a diversity and inclusion job, but there wasn't a way for them to intersect. But in that seeking, I found out that I could actually combine the two and use design thinking to solve diversity and inclusion at the company. And so that led me to create a pitch where I was helping out the HR team with, my first pitch was actually to use design thinking to solve the minority STEM pipeline at Qualcomm. I went big, right? I'm going to solve the whole thing with design thinking. And I was able to present it to them because I'd done so much volunteering. They're like, Carrie, we know you have crazy ideas. Come on over. Let's hear the next one. And so they were like, Carrie, we really like this idea of design thinking. Can you take it and redo your pitch to do a project on staffing and hiring? Because we are focused on that. It's a big priority at the company. And we think that that could be a really great way for you to bring these two things together and to help us. And I was over the moon because staffing has so much diversity and inclusion stuff in it, from the hiring process to who you're sourcing, where you're going for recruiting, all these things. I was super happy to go and make that new pitch. And so I made the pitch. And again, when you're on the right path, things just work out. Made the pitch to a director. She said, awesome, make it to my vice president. He said, awesome, give me a one-sheeter for the EVP. She said, yes, go. So I got my project a green light and built my team and started the project. And it was amazing. For the first time, I was the one in charge. I remember the very first time that I realized this. We were in a meeting making decisions. Someone asked a question. I'm like looking around, seeing who's going to answer it. I'm like, oh, I'm the one who's supposed to answer this question right now. I'm the one in charge of this. So I made that decision, and it led me to figuring out that I can combine design thinking and diversity and inclusion. And now, when I first had that idea, I was like, oh, this is something. This is when my founder, like part 2 started, right? Because that was when I realized this is a book, this is a podcast, this is a company, this is a talk, this is all kinds of things, because no one is using design thinking that I know of to work on diversity and inclusion. And so I put that in my mind, and this was in like 2015. So it took me a while to make the leap. And so I would say there was a certain point in my career. So I'm still in diversity and inclusion. Oh, I forgot to say, so after that project, I actually got hired full-time to work in diversity and inclusion, because before I was doing consulting internally on the user experience team for that staffing project. And then I ended up getting hired by Intel to do design thinking and diversity. So I got poached. And then I got poached back. So I'll skip all the details of that. I got poached back to Qualcomm. So now I'm at Qualcomm full-time doing diversity, equity, inclusion. And I'm bebopping around doing all the things. And at a certain point, I just started to feel like stuck, like I wasn't really thriving, like I had ideas that I couldn't see through. I couldn't get past the bureaucracy, the personalities. It was just, it was too much. And I was starting to feel, when you have a job and you just get so over it, you're like, I could give a care. Like, I really don't care at all. That is how I felt. And that's not my personality at all. I'm always like, idea, 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 idea. I'm just like, don't care even more, really don't care at all. And so around that time, the universe aligned for me again, despite being in this kind of more downtrodden space where I had the opportunity to leave the company and start doing diversity and inclusion with design thinking for a new nonprofit. I had a friend that I had made throughout all my networking, and he was like, hey, we're starting a new nonprofit and we want to see what it would be like to build in inclusion from the bottom up. Would you like to come and do that for us? And so I was like, well, right now I'm not having fun at this job. So yes, absolutely. And so I took that leap. Now, at the same time that I'm doing this is just one job, one client. I also kind of dip my toe into diversity and inclusion consulting for someone else. So I'm working for myself 2 days a week, and I'm working for someone else 3 days a week. So I did the slow roll. I didn't just like leap. And then, so this is like 2019, and I'm doing all the stuff, still working like 2 jobs, my stuff and someone else's stuff. And looking back, of course, my business didn't really take off because I didn't have the momentum needed. I didn't have the focus. I was spending most of my time on someone else's work. And then the pandemic hit. And so a lot of my opportunities went away, and I find myself at home, not sure what I'm going to do, no clients, no consulting. I'm just like, all right, well, I have a myriad of choices, but really 2, like freak the heck out or figure out what I'm going to do right now. And I'm like, well, I have nothing else to do. A lot of people are pausing just to see what's going to happen, right? Like in March, we all just stopped. People stopped. I'm like, some people are going to stop and other people are going to go because they're going to realize this is a time to build the foundation of your business. And so I was like, well, let's go. When this pandemic is over, I'm going to make sure that I'm in a spot where I can hit the ground running versus, okay, now I'm up and have my head up again and let's see what I can do. And so I actually started by just kind of playing around with webinars. A friend of mine from Qualcomm, she didn't work there anymore either. And we're like, hey, let's do a webinar so that we can help people who are feeling really like lost in this time. We called it Drive to Thrive. And it was to help people create a growth mindset in times of uncertainty. So we're just playing around, picking topics that we like. And we partnered with one woman who was a marketing guru. And she was like, hey, you know, she had a great time on our webinar. And she later on, she was like, hey, I keep seeing all these diversity and inclusion type webinars going through my feed. Like, don't you all do that? Shouldn't you be doing one of these, Carrie? And this was right around the time that George Floyd had been murdered. And that day was not a good day for me. And I was just not feeling, and I'm like, you know what, I can't even think about this expansively right now. But when I can, I'll get back to you and see if we want to like partner on something like this. And so it's funny, my brain started working right away because the next day when I woke up, I had like 16 ideas on how we could create this amazing webinar for without having to do a lot of work, because I'm a work smarter, not harder person. And so I didn't want to have to create a training. Like, what can I do right now that would be super easy? And I'm like, well, I feel like around George Floyd, there was this article that went viral that said like, your Black friends aren't okay, you need to check on them. And so if you were a person of color, everyone started emailing you and texting you and calling you all at once, right? And it was overwhelming, but it also showed a need that people had questions, people needed to connect, they wanted to talk about this. And so I'm like, well, what if we just created a webinar where people talked? They just ask questions and we just answer them. We don't have to prepare because we don't know what the questions are. We'll have them send them in ahead of time. And so that's actually how the Inclusion First project was born. Now, not done yet, because my most recent kind of decision that really is, you know, bringing me to even a different level of founding was that after we did the very first one, so we called it Antiracism for Allies, underneath the umbrella of the Inclusion First project. And so people submitted their questions. We had about 25 questions. And when I looked down at the questions, I was just like, each one of these is a piece of data. And so now my design research is back in my mind. I'm like, if I could get a ton of these questions, I could analyze the trends. I could figure out what programs to create, what resources to match people with. I could help people wherever they are based on where they are on their journey of anti-racism, and it'd all be data driven. And so now the Inclusion First project, we've actually collected 650 some questions. And I'm starting this analysis. I've got like 12 major themes, all based on what people have sent in. Here are the things that people ask about the most. And so that also is a book, it's a business, it's a podcast, it's all of these things. And so the founder story is just continuing to evolve. Diversity by Design still exists. We're working on, like I said, equity and understanding equity strategies and helping people build that, because again, people don't know where to start. As an organization, where do I start? Well, you actually start any project with the strategy. So doing the same thing, and now these are happening in parallel. And so you know, it was all these little decisions, some that were very much related to what I was doing, others were related to what was happening in our world, others related to the fact that I just love to play volleyball. But they all put me in these like situations where I was able to grow and to learn to become the woman who is doing these things right now that all make sense to me, that all bring out both my strengths and opportunities to grow, and that combine like my passions and my skills as well. And so that is my founder story. And I told you it was going to be really windy. So there you go.
Carrie, you can always go rogue if that's going to be the outcome. That was great. just think about this is a great segue for a lot of our founders. Just the fact that some of the things you said, I do know you have like this kind of slide, this kind of presentation. We can just go there, and for everyone else on the call, if you want to type in some of your questions to Carrie on Slack, we can do that, and then we'll have this Q&A session afterwards.
Lovely, awesome. So talked about the Inclusion First project and this idea, that name came from the idea of how do you actually build inclusion into an organization? How do you build it first, which is what allowed me to make that leap out of corporate America into that very first project. And so I just wanted to share 3 simple things about putting inclusion first in your business and why you want to do it. And the thing is, like, when you are new, when you are little, when you're small, you kind of think that it doesn't matter yet. And what I'm going to say is that diversity, equity, inclusion matter right now, right now. And it matters for three reasons. And the first of which is that your leadership begins right now. As soon as you found something, you become both a leader and a role model. And you're like, but I don't have any employees. Like, how is that even true? Well, you're not just a leader for your employees, you're a leader for your partners, for your collaborators, and the people who help you think through things. You're a leader for your vendors, you're a leader for your clients and for your customers and for your community as well. And so starting to think about what kind of leader you want to be starts really before, before you start to found something, but definitely once you founded it, because you have a responsibility to be a good leader and defining what that means to you. And I would suggest that you look into what does it mean to become an inclusive leader, and starting to build out some of those skills, doing some readings, doing some leadership training in that space, because that helps you to think about it both strategically at a high level, but then also like, what does that mean for you and how does that manifest in your leadership style? And so that first reason is that your leadership begins right now. Now, the second thing is that every decision that you make in your business is either building inclusion or it's building exclusion. And we don't really think about it like that, but it's totally true. As you are thinking about the way that you hire, maybe you're hiring your first person, and so there's really no process, you're just doing it. Well, the process that you use for the first time is likely the process you're going to use for the second time and the fifth time and the 70th time, et cetera, right? So the decisions that you make on how you go about it will sway you to inclusion or exclusion. And so thinking about that really for all of the decisions that you make, is this decision more inclusive or less inclusive? Because inclusion is not, and diversity and equity, it's not a vertical, right? It is a horizontal, it goes through everything. And so starting to think about what does it actually mean to think about equity in this decision? What does it mean to think about inclusion? And just asking yourself that simple question. The answer might be, I'm not sure, but then that might also set you on a path to figure out what does it mean to me and how can I pick something that creates more inclusion than exclusion. And then the third thing totally ties into this. So doing it over is way harder than doing it right the first time. And so I use hiring as an example. Again, on that 70th time, if you look at your organization and find out that it is all one or two types of people, you're like, oh crap, how do I fix this? Versus at the beginning, when you're hiring those first few people, thinking about how you're going to be intentional about creating a diverse workforce, right? And so we end up like fixing these things. We have to redo work that we've already done. And think about companies like Qualcomm, like Intel, like Google. They're so huge. It takes a lot of work to change what that workforce looks like. The fact that there's hardly, there's way less women in tech is a hard thing to change when you have thousands and thousands of employees. But when you have 5, it's much easier. And the thing is, we know that like likes like. So people tend to hire people who look like them, right? And so there's ways that you can help people to be more diverse and inclusive in how they do that, but also having a foundation of different kinds of people means that those people are going to know people who look like them to build this more diverse workforce. And so that's just one example, but thinking about how we set up these processes when we're setting it up for the very first time makes such a huge difference versus having to fix your work and correct the mistakes later. So that's just a taste. I know, Curling, before we talked about how to build inclusion into your business, we talk about some of these things. So there's a previous YouTuber where you can get more information on how to build inclusion into your business. But I did want to bring up these 3 things because I know as founders, there's so much. It's like 17 fire hoses. It's not just one, right? But every decision you can just pause and just think about how to be more inclusive because it does matter, especially the more you grow and the larger you get.
Oh, this is great. Actually, I was looking at these 1, 2, 3s. You always have helped me out, Carrie. It's got, engineering 1, 2, 3. I love that. So I have these things in my head. You did that for me earlier, which was great. Thank you so much. Love the rogue story. This is actually great. One question I have, and I know there's gonna be some more people having questions, right? I know Joanna is that. Actually, in fact, Joanna, in some ways, did you want to start off first? I know Joanna, I'm gonna let Joanna have the floor. She has a couple questions for you.
Hi, Joanna.
Unmute. Can you unmute?
too. So let me turn my camera on. Oh yeah, I should unmute too. Let me do that.
Yeah.
That was a really fun story. Thank you for sharing that. It's so great to see you always. I put it in the chat, but I'll say it too. Thank you for creating a space where people authentically want to understand, can ask their dumb questions, because I have a couple of them.
I'm here for you.
I appreciate that about you. I love the allyship. It's the first time that I had encountered that term, and now like it's in my Gartner feed and it's like all over the place. But I never even heard that term until I encountered it, through the work that you're doing. And I am struggling with understanding, like, how do I use that term? Like, what does it mean and what does it encompass? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So Inclusion First Project, we have the Antiracism for Allies. And so allies is really anyone who is going to come and both stand in solidarity with a group, but then also do the work that needs to be done as well. And so allyship is always an active thing. And in this case, I'm talking about Antiracism for Allies. And so it's really interesting because the Inclusion First Project is primarily marketed towards white allies, but as people of color, we also become allies because racism is not just black and white, right? It's all races experience racism. And so there might be times where we have to step forward or step back as an ally. But it's really about, so understanding the issues, understanding number one, that there is an issue, because we still have people who think racism isn't a thing, right? But moving on from that rabbit hole, so understanding that there is an issue. Understanding more detail about the issues. So that's where you get into your learning, your reading, your following, your watching, and then understanding what you can do as an ally. And your allyship might actually start off just by learning, like that is an action, right? But then eventually, how do you take that learning and turn it into action? And that gets really overwhelming for people really quickly because racism is such a huge thing. But what I'm suggesting is that you're uniquely situated in a sphere of influence, and you only have to worry about, especially at first, what's happening around you. Your allyship and your action, your anti-racism, could be making sure that your kids don't grow up racist. It could be that you have a volunteer organization where you're talking about these things. It could be that you are in a leadership position or position of influence at work, and so you bring it in there. And so finding those little opportunities, whether that is learning more, saying something when you see something like going like sideways in this space, or actually like figuring out, okay, how can I make a change at my work? Maybe there isn't a safe space to have conversations. So we start a small discussion group. Maybe I start a book club with my sister and my aunt. There's all kinds of different things that you can do, but it is all about that active work and understanding when you can make a difference in the space and doing that, and also creating spaces and opportunity for other people, typically in that marginalized group. So for our Antiracism for Allies, when can you create space for a brown person to come forward and share their story, for a brown person to get an opportunity that they wouldn't have gotten before, for a brown person to speak in a space where they're not there, but you are there and you're going to speak for them. And that's kind of really the only time you speak for a brown person is when they're not there and the voice needs to be in the room. But how do you get them in the room? So there's tons and tons of ways, but that's kind of a short, longish answer, Joanna. There's,
And then my other question kind of ties into that, which is, I'm updating all of our marketing materials, and mission has sort of evolved from just helping entrepreneurs to really specifically focusing on 3 communities, Black and brown founders, women, and the veteran community. But as I'm updating the marketing materials, I'll be really transparent here. Like, I keep wanting to put an asterisk on everything that says for white people too.
Yeah.
I feel like I need to let go of that.
Yeah, and sometimes we feel like when we're focusing on a group that it's to the exclusion of another group, but that's really never the case. And that's more kind of like just fears and insecurity, which is totally normal. We're all people. It's always, it's a both and, right? So you're serving both and the reason why we're focusing is because there's a problem that we're trying to fix.
Right.
It's around representation. So, where the playing field isn't like this, and you're like, okay, black and brown, woo, the playing field is like this. Right. On the other hand, and you're trying to raise the playing field, right? So it's flipping how we think about it, right?
Yeah.
So that in our mind, we're understanding what we're doing. We're not excluding, we're raising, we're including more people because these people are already here, but you're also welcome too, right? Because we're not going to do this alone, for sure.
great. That helps me sort of have peace with like I'm trying to be really inclusive and I'm shutting out like a whole group. Seems wrong.
Yeah, no, I totally understand what you mean.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay,
Sean.
I'll stop talking now.
No, that's good. I thought you were going to ask Carrie that whole thing about when we're doing branding, like, a lot of our startups are doing this kind of branding and how you had the different blue people and you had those people and
Oh yeah, that's a great question
you
too.
want to ask that? Because that's kind of like some of our startups are branding and doing stuff on their website and posting.
So I've been reading.
Yeah,
I've been reading a lot of articles about just design as I'm updating sort of the graphics and the can feel of our website. We built this new website and then it looks really nice, I think. And then I told Carling like all the people are white. Like, and they're just cartoons, but they're all still white. So I'm trying to like change like make the people not white and still make it look like a cohesive design, of course. And
Sure.
and so I started with like, maybe I'll just make them all blue or purple or some other color that's like, because nobody has that skin color. And so but then I thought like, you know what, no, we have a really specific mission on specific groups, and I should make the founders actually look like the people on our website should look kind of like I should imagine real people that I want to help and make the graphics on our site look like that. So I guess I think Carly is saying like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's so great that we even thought of it, right? Because a lot of people just don't. Marketing, how you're talking and what people look like is a huge thing that just kind of gets passed over a lot. So kudos for thinking about it. And yeah, if you can create pictures that represent the people that you are speaking to, that's always amazing. And even if you went back and took your blue people and turned it into all shades of different people,
that's what I'm doing.
That'd be a beautiful way to do it too. That
and
way
you can see it behind curtain.
Oh yeah, love it. Yeah, so creating representative marketing in your words and also in your imagery, super important. So you're on the right track for sure.
Thanks. It was way harder than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, Fokcus is officially woke, as my daughter would say.
I love that word.
That's great.
I was talking to my sister about that. Like, that's great. You know what, Stephen? I know we don't have any other ones from the cohort, but definitely you can step in and ask some questions offhand in the chat. But Stephen, you had a question too.
Yeah, I did have a question. So Carrie, kind of building off of some of the things you said with Joanna and some of the stories that you shared as part of your founder story, and then of course the slides. So that we deal with a lot of early stage founders, a lot of wide demographic, right? Veterans, Black and brown founders, women, a lot of different types of people come from a lot of different backgrounds, right? And so I know you mentioned hiring, and you had kind of this whole step-by-step kind of approach to that in terms of diversity and inclusion. Are there any other big challenges you see in founders, early stage startups that you've seen in terms of diversity and inclusion? And if there are, how do you address them?
So, I mean, honestly, I think that founders have the same problems plus more as like a bigger organization. It's just like manifests in a different way. And so you see, I have this whole flow chart that I don't have like pulled up right now, but I'll just go through some of the like different phases of what we call like the employee experience. And this is just on the employee side, right? Because as a founder, you're thinking about both what's happening inside of your company and what's happening outside of the company, right? So you've got to run inclusion on both of those tracks. But as far as like on the internal side, you're thinking about, okay, well, how are we like presenting ourselves in the world? Like Joanna gave a really great example of kind of the marketing. What does that look like? Because that's how people are first going to resonate with, or you're going to resonate with them or not, right? Once you come in, you've got your hiring process, you've got your onboarding. How do you get people ingrained? And even if your culture is very, I'm not going to say small, but you're a small company, so you're not really thinking a lot about culture, but you start to put those mission and values in front of people, right? And are your mission and values inclusive or exclusive? Or maybe you feel like they're neutral, but you have an opportunity to, shift the balance towards inclusive there, right? And thinking about what is it like to work at your company, so that everyday inclusion, what is the environment? And this is why I'm talking about leadership initially. Like, you're a leader, you're creating this environment. what is that like for people when they come to work? Are you creating a high stress environment where you can't fail, you have to get everything done yesterday? Or are you creating an environment that is more conducive for creativity and innovation and exploration and failure, which of course we know are super key to you finding what the thing is that you're going to do well? Sorry, hang on one second. There, can you hear that noise in the background? Okay, hang on.
And know what, Joanna, I put you on mute on that part, but what I was thinking about is actually we need to go over how you actually did some of the rebranding, because that process, I think for all the founders, it'd be great. Just how you came out, how we actually used some of the templates from, what's the name of the company that we use a template? Joanna, you remember that?
Is it
Plush.
The blush?
Blush,
and
yeah.
Then the specific package was the shiny happy people, which
Exactly.
I love because they've got all these weird proportions. They don't look like, I'm not trying to show real people. I'm just trying to give you like the taste of people, not necessarily like actual people. We used to have actual pictures on our site, and then we said it would be nicer to, looks younger and more modern, I think, to move away from that.
So we can do a session on that. Carrie's back. Carrie, we'll let you have the floor
Sorry
again.
about that. There's vacuuming that all of a sudden happening. This is the life of being at home in a pandemic.
Totally. It's real talk.
I was going to say, I also use a site called Raw Pixel, and they have a lot of diverse both photography and also iconography as well. So definitely check out Raw Pixel.
Okay, nice.
Now.
But yeah, so we were talking about, that day-to-day inclusion. This is all inside of your company. So I honestly think that this matters so much, even if you're small, because this is the culture that you bring out to every single person and every single group that you come into contact with. And so thinking about, how are you developing your employees? How are you giving people equal opportunities, equal access to opportunities? One of the big things in corporate is that people don't get promoted because they haven't done the job, but then they never have the chance to do the job. And so it's this circle inside of your small startup. How are you making sure that you're giving opportunities out in an equal way so everyone is being developed, not just like training on the outside, but like actually like on the job experience? And so, it keeps going. And just thinking about all of these little things, honestly, every single decision, there is an element of inclusivity in there, an opportunity to create a better experience, both internally, but then again, how are you interacting with your vendors? What do those contracts look like? Where can you have more inclusive language? I was doing a contract with an organization recently, and the language was so like, it was just so masculine and so very much like, this is ours and not yours. This is ours and not yours. And I'm just like, well, is that the kind of relationship we even want to create? Right? We want to create a relationship where I feel good and you feel good. And that's all about inclusivity and
that's
equity.
That's not how lawyers think.
Exactly. It's not. But could they think that way? Should they think that way? And what kind of world what kind of business are you trying to build? And so that goes back to like your values, Stephen, and how you're deciding who you're going to be, and then making sure that that shows up in every single little place, right? So this is the habit, this is the skill that you're building. And you don't do it all at once, because how can you think about this every time? But you start to learn how to bring it into more and more things until it becomes that habit, and you're just automatically doing it now at a certain point. I don't know when that happens in the journey, but it can.
10,000
and it will.
10,000 hours, right?
Yes, exactly.
That's great. A good question, Stephen. What I'm thinking, Carrie, like, is there some things that we're going to slowly go to this kind of speed networking part? But is there some last thoughts that you have for the little Carries and other founders out there?
Yeah, I would just say, like, don't get overwhelmed. We already are overwhelmed as founders, but when we start to think about how we can build inclusion into the different parts of our business, it really is just about starting where you are with what you're doing right now. You don't have to get it everywhere perfectly right all the time, but what's the one thing that you can do as you're creating this new process? And then next week you're creating a new process again. What's the one new thing I can do today to really think about how I can pull inclusion in? And just keeping it simple like that.
I think Sunny has a question. Do you see it?
Yeah, I did see it. Kate Salat, she's EIR. She's gonna Sunny, you want to unmute yourself if you have a question?
I have a really quick question, Carrie. I always love all your stories. They're so inspiring, and it's so funny because like there's a lot of things that every one of your stories have that kind of just remind me of a place that I'm trying to go. You know, as far as inclusion and diversity. I actually have a Black allyship workshop that I developed for the CSUSM campus, and we're actually going to start piloting to the board, the CSUSM board, the president and all her cabinet in March.
Amazing.
So I'm super excited for it because
That's
we're like
amazing.
we're like the first campus that actually has Black allyship training. So
Congratulations. That's phenomenal.
thank you. And what's another thing that's interesting too is that I always have the desire for tech. And so my question for you is, with all the data that you got from the questions that you had and all the themes that you created as well, do you plan on like maybe possibly like learning or figuring out how to like possibly create some sort of a program or software program or anything that can actually help companies to kind of like figure out how, I don't know, just for some reason, like when you were telling me about it, like like a bunch of ideas were popping in my head. I'm like, oh my gosh, she could do a program, she could do this, she could do that, she could do this. So I'm just like kind of curious, like where do you plan on, what do you plan on doing with the data and how far do you see it going?
That's such a great question, Sunny. And I will be calling you to find out what those ideas are for sure. Right now, I'm at the point where I'm like, okay, I have this data and I could see it could be so many things. What is the one thing, what is the one direction that I want to take it in for right now? But I definitely would love to make it so that it's scalable, right? So that more people can use it, so that it's really easy. And all that output. Someone asked me in another talk, like, was I going to use machine learning and AI to like examine the questions and the language? I'm like, that's such a great idea. But there's technology ideas hidden everywhere. So I love how you're thinking. My answer right now is that I don't know. But again, just like hook me up with your email so I can like brainstorm with you. And I would love to hear about the program that you developed too, if you ever want to talk shop together. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
Yes, then you can put what email you want on the on Slack, and I can just connect you guys that way too.
Yes, you can actually use my business email.
Okay, nice.
Awesome.
And Carrie, even offhand, like we'll put on a link too, but even if, like, what's the best way to connect with you too for the cohort?
Absolutely. Should I say now?
Yeah, you can say now. Yeah.
Okay, cool. You can get me at Carrie at inclusionfirstproject.org, and it's first with like the one ST, not spelled out. But yeah, I'm happy to talk shop, like brainstorm. I'm a good brainstormer. It's one of my superpowers. So love doing that. I always have a fun time.
Do you want to just put it on the chat for everybody to have that?
Hopefully I got it right.
So we're at 12:45. We're going to try to do the speed network and connect everyone up. That kind of one-on-one session, it takes about 5 minutes. Usually you can talk about yourself or about just maybe meet someone new. But Stephen, I'll let you wrap it up.
Awesome. So we'll wrap it up and do the speed networking. For those that don't want to stay for the speed networking, you're welcome to jump off, and then whoever remains, we will connect everyone up. But yeah, just to wrap things up, thank you, Carrie, for jumping on today. It was great to hear your talk, founder's story, great answers to questions. As far as diversity and inclusion goes, I know we run into a lot of people in the startup space, founders and things like that you just don't know what you don't know, right? And so to be able to have a platform where you can ask questions, even if they're dumb questions, right, and get answers, and also be able to hear other people, and of course, all your experience, right, is awesome. So thank you for all that.
Thank you.
But yeah, for those of you watching on YouTube, feel free to give us a like, leave a comment down below, share your thoughts. If you have questions for Carrie or just want to continue the discussion on some of the things she shared today, diversity, inclusion, and anything else, feel free to leave a comment down below. All the interactions we get with videos like this help push them out to more people. So if you found something really insightful or really awesome about the video today, leave a like, leave a comment. It might push it out to somebody else who, might benefit a lot from hearing, things Carrie shared today. But as always, we will see you in the next video.